Voice of college football, breaking down the game we all love each and every day with you and with one of the most respected voices in the game, Tom Luginbill, ESPN recruiting analyst, scout. You catch him on the sidelines during the college football season and doing some XFL, Tom, I understand. I'm not an XFL guy, so I know you from all the recruiting and watching the games in the fall.
Well, I'm kind of an XFL lifer. I was the quarterbacks coach at Los Angeles in 2001. And then I was on the field as a field analyst in 2.0 in 2020 before the pandemic hit. And now I've been in the booth for the last 9 weeks, going on our last regular season game this coming weekend. So it's been a blast. It's made my spring very, very busy because normally this is a time that is really heavy in high school tape evaluation and camps and combines and things of that nature. So been juggling a lot of balls in the air recently.
And with all that going on, we appreciate you stopping by. And I got to say, again, this is going to be a great conversation just because we have nerds watching us, and I'm one of them, and we love to dive deep and get the insight from guys that really know what they're talking about. So I'm going to start really, really big picture, and then I'm going to go granular because this is a sport that we all love. But it's not like the NFL where they are making decisions for the good of the NFL. There's a reason they all get together. They're not like, let's make a decision for the AFC East or the NFC North.
Yeah.
And I really think that the pandemic showed us a lot about the power structure of college football and that the conferences do what they want. And so now we're in a situation where we can't expect Greg Sankey to make a decision that's for the best of college football. He's hired and given a role by the SEC. So do you really think that we need a governing body or a commissioner of college football?
Well, we need some type of leadership that would handle policing, enforcement, policy engagement, regulation, things of that nature. The problem with the college structure as it relates to college football, if we're comparing it to the business model of the National Football League, is in college, not all programs are created equal. And so, if Alabama is going to do what's best for Alabama, all right, well, you can't do that exact same thing for Middle Tennessee State because the numbers don't work out, right? It's just there's always going to be a huge disparity in funding, resources allotted, leadership management, so on and so forth. And I think that probably now more than ever, we need to really streamline our rules. When I say rules, I mean everything from how many coaches you can have on the field to how many coaches you can have on the road to throwing out 3/4 of what we currently know now as the NCAA rule book as it relates to recruiting, because it's so archaic based off of the world we've entered here in the last 3 to 4 years that there's no way to utilize that type of framework and have it make any impact on what we're doing right now. So from that perspective, I do think we have to have some leadership, and we've got to find a way to understand that there are going to be different tiers of college football. There always have been, and there always will be. Not everybody can be Ohio State. Not everybody can be Clemson. Not everybody can be USC. That's just part of the deal. But what I've become frustrated with over the last 3 to 4 years, more than anything else, is we've arguably taken the most transformative legislation ever dumped upon college athletics, at least over the last 40 years, through name, image, and likeness, the extra year of eligibility, okay, where we stand in recruiting right now, and we dumped it on the laps of every institution in America with zero plan on how to execute it, no plan on how to police it. And if we're going to police rules, where is the enforcement going to come from? I hear people always talk about, oh, well, name, image, and likeness, that's great. That's gonna really allow a lot of programs to close the gap. I'm like, no, it's not. All name, image, and likeness is going to do is further the gap for the reasons I've stated, because not all programs are created equal. And if you think that's going to help you keep up, you're crazy. But we've gone down this path now. It's not supposed to affect recruiting. It's not supposed to be used as an enticement. Give me a break. I mean, we're living in la la land here. How are we supposed to deal with tampering which is the biggest issue right now as it relates to college football recruiting, the transfer portal, and name, image, and likeness. I mean, that right there is probably where everything needs to start from a leadership standpoint and dissecting how we get on course with at least some semblance of order.
Yeah, so the Johnny Manziel situation, when he was apparently signing autographs in Florida and then he got in trouble by the NCAA, and then they said they didn't have enough of a case to do anything about it, but they still suspended him for the first half of the game to open the season. That was at the point, that was the eye opener for me to say they should be getting ahead of this, because this is just going to be an avalanche at some point. And here we are 10 years later. And here we are, and nobody took hold of that. I guess the NCAA, for as much as we would want to criticize what their role has been or what they've done in the past, at least they had a role and had some power in the past. And it seems like that is completely diminished.
It's absolutely diminished, and it's really their own fault because they let it go down this path. They tried to rely on state, local, and federal government to take care of the problem. I'm fairly certain Congress and Senate has a lot more things on their plate that are more important than this. You know, it's like, come on, keep order of your own house. And to further matters, and I'm not sure if you're familiar, this is really recent, as recent as the last 2 to 3 weeks, but the state of Oklahoma and now the state of Texas have just put forth legislation, and in Oklahoma it passed, essentially stating, and I'm paraphrasing here, that no body of governance over college athletics will be able to have any impact on policing or enforcing name, image, and likeness as it relates to what a university or what that university's collective does. In essence, saying that, well, if they have a collective and they're using name, image, and likeness, and it's quote unquote supposed to be outside of the allowable rules, the legislation is basically saying that doesn't matter because we supersede if the NCAA or whoever that governing body could be wanted to come in and investigate it, enforce it, and potentially lay down restrictions. Well, don't you think every single state in America is now going to follow suit? I mean, it took Texas less than a week to do what Oklahoma did because they're all going to try and protect their universities, right? They're all going to try and protect their pot of gold. And if they have state to state legislation that says that they're protected from any type of enforcement, they're all going to be lining up to go to their state senate.
Because as soon as this unfolded, what was it? It was July 1st, and what it's been a year and a half ago, going on 2 years. We were all thinking, okay, yeah, we were hearing that the states were going to have that power to legislate whatever they want. And then there's going to be this inconsistency from state to state. And there you go.
Right. And here
You
we
got
go. And here we have it. And again, I say not all programs are created equal. Neither are all states. Like, what if you happen to be a university with tremendous resources and you're in a state that's basically, it's the wild, wild west, and you have government regulations that are protecting you. And then there's a program over here that has the same amount of resources, same top tier. And they're in a state that's saying, nope, can't do that. What are you going to do? I'll tell you what you're going to do. They're going to cheat because they're going to be forced to.
Yeah, absolutely. I still remember a few times going to luncheons with Jim Delaney, Big Ten commissioner, and him really painting an interesting picture. And this was pre-NIL of the world that he played in at North Carolina as a basketball player in regards to, and we're talking about the elite of the elite at North Carolina, but the world in which the demands were on a college athlete then in 1968 versus now. And it's just a completely different world. And you know that better than anyone else, just about the job basically that's placed on these athletes.
Well, and you use the term job, and it's interesting because their responsibilities are very similar to a full-time job. But then when they were in the summer, we used to say, well, you're on scholarship, you can't go get a job. What? It's like my only free time during the year, and you're telling me I can't have an opportunity to just go cut grass? That's going to be illegal? It's ridiculous. The one thing, though, that I will say that I push back on a lot, and I know name, image, and likeness is here to stay. I'm sure there's going to be some tweaks and some governance that's going to be coming. There has to be, quite honestly. It's going to fold underneath its own weight eventually. But when people act like student athletes that are on scholarship, and I'm just going to talk football here, But when they act like that they're not provided with anything, and that these guys are starving, and that they don't have access to this, and this, that is the biggest load of bull. And that's insanity when I hear any of that stuff. When you're on scholarship, you're getting fed, you're getting all the supplements and all of the nutrient type of things now that you could possibly want. You have access to athletic training, strength and conditioning, all at your fingertips, study hall, tutoring, everything literally right in front of you to ensure that you do not fail, right? So when I hear all these stories about, well, I don't have enough money to go take out my girlfriend and all this, and I'm like, okay, that may apply to a group, all right, that may apply to some, but a lot of that is very, very mythical. And again, a lot of it depends on what is your background, where have you come from, and things of that nature. But we act like they're not being fed sometimes, and that's baloney.
Yeah, Arian Smith last weekend during the Georgia spring game took us on a little tour through the cafeteria and the training table, and man,
Oh yeah, right?
Man, good stuff.
Yeah.
Would love to have that smorgasbord every day myself. Absolutely.
Sure.
We got Tom Luginbill here, ESPN sideline reporter, of course, recruiting analyst and scout. I'm a bit curious before we segue back to what's going on with college football. You played at Georgia Tech. You had a long line of coaching there in the XFL and certainly related type leagues. Recruiting analyst now doesn't like take anyone off guard like, oh, this is some kind of crazy thing, but it's almost like Mel Kiper in 1980, reviewing film and trying to be an NFL scout at that point, or a recruiting analyst, or at the NFL level that, nobody ever heard of. You started this at a point where this was not a common thing. So what gave you the idea to branch off into that field?
That's a good question. Well, you referenced I had been in professional football and in coaching and scouting for about 11 years prior to taking on this role at ESPN, and getting ready to start a family. And I grew up the son of a college coach, so I knew exactly the profession I was in, what I bought into, and you own it. I actually made my wife go through an entire year of a football season before she agreed to actually get married, so she knew what was going on. And that part was easy. And then we started having kids, and I was just like, I just don't know. I want something that's got a little bit more stability. And I really loved the scouting side of things. And I had a brief stint with the Dallas Cowboys in that role. I really liked it. It actually led to me getting a job with Scouts Inc. And you referenced Mel Kiper, but it was in those early days, Scouts Inc. was me, Todd McShay, and about 4 people that were all behind the scenes as film watchers and writing reports and grading guys. And we were all doing NFL free agent type stuff. And we were doing it for other people in the sense that we were a behind the scenes content provider. We had a contract with ESPN. We had a contract at one point with CBS. We had a contract with CNNSI. This is in the early 2000s. And so I started to realize, hey, I really like this. I'm working out of my home. I got more stability. I'm still involved in the game. I had to make the decision on whether or not I could live without coaching and that competitive culture and that, the environment of going into an office every day. And so I made that decision. And so out of nowhere, just literally out of nowhere, as I referenced, we had a contract with ESPN. ESPN comes to the guy that I was working for at the time and says, hey, we're thinking about getting into the coverage of recruiting, but we don't necessarily want to do it the way the internet's doing it right now. So there was rivals.com, scout.com, later became 247. Now there's On3 and then us. And so really the only way I agreed to say, hey, I'll get out of this part of football and go into this new territory was if it was going to be scouting based, in the sense that I'm not a reporter. I'm not a journalist. I wasn't going to call kids and say, hey, who are your top 5 schools? And, when are you taking an official visit? And when are you narrowing down your schools? And then writing an article and posting it to a website that's linked to 5 other team websites. And then you pay $99 a month to get your information, right? And there are a ton of really good people that are doing that for these websites. This is what they do. It's what they own. It's what they know. I had no interest in that. And in having no interest in that, I actually created a lot of criticism from myself and our staff, because we are looking at what we're doing purely through the lens of a projection, just like you would in the NFL draft, just like you would in free agency, just like you do in every personnel department in college football. Can this guy play for us? If so, why? What are his strengths? What are his deficiencies? Can we live with his deficiencies? And everything's based off of film study, and we hit our camps and combines to supplement our evaluations. And then we come up with rankings and things of that nature. But because we do it that way, and it's so drastically different than the way the websites do it, our rankings are usually way different, right? So way different in the eyes of fans always means way wrong, right? It's like sometimes I'll tell people like, so we have a guy ranked. All right, I'll give you a prime example. Here's a prime example. DJ Uiagalelei, national top 5 recruit across the board for every recruiting website. We had him at 39. The vitriol we took during that recruiting cycle was unbelievable. And my response was always, and I tell our staff this is a subjective business. It's an inexact science, especially with the younger player. If he's 22 years old, you have a lot more information to go on. When he's 15, you have so many unknown variables. But I tell our guys, you're going to be wrong. That's okay. But if you believe in it, you want to stand on the table for a guy, or you think that everybody else has got it wrong, let's present the evidence and talk about it as a staff. And on that particular one, we all kind of dug our heels in. We dug our heels in because we did not feel he was innately accurate. We felt like he's big, he's strong, he has a strong arm, and everybody's gotten enamored with that. And they tend to gloss over or block, well, the deficiencies are there, and they've been there since he was a freshman. And me, I was really worried about that, because to me, quarterbacking is about 2 things: accuracy and decision making. I don't care how tall you are. I don't care how tall or strong your arm is, how fast you can run. Accuracy and decision making. So the point I'm making is, when we got into this, we didn't get into this to get into the rumor mill business of doing your traditional website sub package model, where you're truly catering to a fan base from whatever particular university that is. And what they do is spectacular, because that's all they major in all the time. For us, and like I said, we're going to be wrong. But for us, my whole thing was, there will be nobody on our staff that hasn't either coached or scouted at the collegiate or professional level. We don't have journalists. We don't have bloggers. All right. And the guys that are going to sit in that room have an expertise or have been involved in the game where a record has gone next to their name and they've had to be accountable for it. And that was going to be kind of the credibility of our staff. And that was really, really important to me, because I joke all the time about the College Football Playoff Committee. And I've told Bill Hancock this. So, Bill, why do you guys have college professors? Why do you have an Air Force colonel? Or why do you have some of these people on the College Football Playoff Committee? All right. And I said, if we were going to name the top 4 dentists in America, the top 4 dentists, and we put together a 13-person committee, would there be a football coach on that committee? And the answer is like, well, no. Well, no. So I always found that odd, right? I've always found that to be a bit odd, because I do think the sport of football, just like basketball, just like anything else, it's a very unique sport that requires a unique perspective. And those guys that are in that college football playoff room, you think those coaches ain't running those meetings, man? I mean, when it comes down to it, and somebody says, well, I don't know about this, or I guarantee you there's 5 coaches over there going, this is what we're doing. It's so that's kind of what got me into it. Going on 18 years, we were able to create the Under Armour All-America game, where we put that whole entire deal together. That's going on 15 years now. And then it just eventually morphed into studio television, then in-game analysis. And then I actually was asked about 12 years ago to take on this new field analyst role that I do. That does require having to do a halftime and a post game interview, but essentially I'm just an open mic. It's like a 3-man booth, and I'm on the field, and I'm just giving different perspective, different vantage point, because I got sights and sounds, and I'm around it, and I can give a perspective that the guys in the booth can't. And then it's just a real good back and forth. And so this job, to be honest with you, I know it's a long-winded answer, took a very different path than I would have ever expected. When I first signed on to do the recruiting thing, it was strictly ESPN.com. That's it. And then I fell into the television thing. It just happened to happen because I was doing this one thing, which led to another thing, which then led to another thing. And here I am 18 years later.
Well, it's an amazing journey, and I got to say, Tom, that yeah, there are sideline reporters all over the place that for what their role is, they do a fine job. But you mentioned McShay, and between you and McShay, that's just a whole other level of sideline analyst that the geeks want to see because they want to hear the nuts and bolts of what's going on in the trenches and elsewhere.
Yeah, it's been something I've really tried to embrace it. I've been on the same crew. When I say the same crew, I've been with Dave Pash. It was me and Dave Pash and Brian Greasy was our first little guinea pig deal for 3 years. Then it was me, Dave Pash, and Greg McElroy for 4 years, and then the pandemic happened. So I was calling games from the booth, but I was actually in a closet in Charlotte doing it remotely for an entire year in 2020, and then went back with Dave Pash in 21 and 22. And so I think what we've always tried to do is get as much access from the field as we possibly can, in the sense that, I mean, we're not going to get XFL access that we have in the purpose of that league. But for example, I had a game between Northwestern and Ohio State. And the way
The wind game?
Northwestern was playing, which one?
The wind game this past year?
No. This would have been several years ago.
Okay.
This is an example of some of the cool things that I think we can do, that we can get some insight that kind of reflect your point. Is the way Northwestern plays on defense, man. They have 2 big defensive tackles, and they line them up in what's called a two technique. So they are head up over both guards. And they are really, really hard to move those guys. And so Ohio State on that day decided that they were going to use what they call their G scheme. So they were going to block down on that guy and then loop around with the guard, because they couldn't block him just head up like that. So I'm on the field and we're having this discussion about why it's so hard. So I press my button and I tell our producer, I said, hey, get our handheld camera over here. And I'm going to show a demo of what this 2 technique is and why he's so hard to move. And the guy that I used on it was the guy that was holding my light. We have these lights, so when we go on camera, they got to turn the light on. So we literally have a person at every game that is walking around following me. It looks like a staff, and it looks like a light bright. So he just followed me, and I was like, hey man, come here, I need you. I'm going to use you as my on-air demo. So I took this guy, we're on camera, and I set him up. I said, so here's our defensive tackle. He's head up on me right here. If I move him here, he's in a 1 technique. If I move him here, he's in a 3 technique. All right. So with him being right here, head up on me, this is why it's so important. If I'm the guard, I don't have to just block him one-on-one. We're going to angle block him down, and I'm going to loop around. And we did all of this on air with the guy holding my light stick. He just set it down on the ground. And we did what later ended up being labeled as what we call demos. Like I would, so then that led into, we had a horrendous rain game one week. And I did a demo on how you want to grip a football if it's raining, the ball's wet. All right. And what are the challenges and how? And so I had my mic, I'd have the ball. We just put it on film, like things like that from a field perspective, whether it's elements, whether it's scheme, whether it's, I've had on multiple occasions, I'll be standing next to the team box, goes from the 25 to the 25, and I'll just be standing there, and I'll be looking down, and balls in the red area, maybe inside 10-yard line. And I remember Jimbo Fisher one time yelled at me. He's like, Tommy. And I look over, he goes, how close? Close. Because he couldn't tell he couldn't go all the way down there. And he literally asked me in the middle of the freaking game. Right. And so it was just, we've had a lot over the course of 10 years, those types of insights. And then what happens is I report on it, or I'm on camera, or I'm just talking and my font comes up. And then because we're all open mic'd, it goes up, and then Dusty might respond and further the point. Or Greg would say, well, what happened if on this, and this, and then I'd go back and forth with him. So it just made it like we had I'll give you another example. It was awesome. So we had Oklahoma with Kyler Murray, right? And we were trying to give the fan a true sense of just how short Kyler Murray is. So I told our producer, I said, when we get Oklahoma gets backed up, like they get backed up inside like their own 10, right? They're huddled and they're going away from me. I'm going to stand right next to the goalpost, and I want the camera going right over my shoulder, all right? So that you can see, here's Oklahoma's line and here's Kyler Murray. But that perspective you don't get from upstairs, right? And so those are the things that have made the whole field analyst thing really fun and really engaging. And it almost feels like we're always trying to just come up with something new, come up with a different way to paint a picture or gain some access and things of that nature. So that part's been a lot of fun.
And I got to tell you, Tom, I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times. I'm a guy that grew up in broadcasting. So Dave Pasch, he's as good as it gets. He's phenomenal.
Unbelievable.
People don't realize that because he's not doing the primetime game or whatever. So people don't realize how good he is. And then you bring up McElroy and Dusty Dvorak and guys like that in the booth. Wow. That's a great team.
Yeah. I've been blessed. I mean, I've been with great people. And to be honest with you, Dusty and Greg and Grease deserve most of the credit, because the one thing that you have to do as a broadcaster in the booth when you have a field analyst, you got to remove your ego. Because if you want it to be all about you, then the person on the field is never going to get in the broadcast. And that's not the point of being a field analyst. If I'm never going to get in the broadcast, then take me off the field. I'm not doing any good. It's not serving the purpose. So those guys actually deserve a ton of credit for engaging with me and embracing the whole thing. Because it's challenging. I don't have a monitor, right? I'm not standing next to them. My mic's open and we rarely talk over each other. We've just kind of learned the cadences and the pauses and we just kind of, it's just like this dance that we somehow do. And, you're going to have times where I jump in and Dusty might've jumped and we talked over each other for a second. And then you just back away and you move on. But it's been a really, really good group. And I always say this about Dave Pasch. There's a reason they don't put anybody else with Bill Walton.
Yeah, that is true. I'm not a big basketball guy anymore. I used to be. But yes, to put up with that and to handle that. And he knows exactly when to play off of him and when to just ignore him and keep calling the game and just let it rest. Absolutely.
No doubt. There's no doubt. Yeah.
Tom, I will say that there are better looking sideline reporters than you, but we learn a lot more.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a heck of a lot better sideline, and I got one working on my XFL crew. She's incredibly talented, Stormy Bonantoni, and she's been a treat. And it's interesting because Todd, I always bust Todd's chops because they put a reporter with him. So he never has to do the halftime or post-game interview. I'm like, what's up, man? Come on. It's part of the gig. It goes with it, bro. You're going to have to, you got to do it. If I got to do it, you got to do it.
Yeah, you got to throw the obligatory, which I hate, but I know it's got to be done. The one question to the coach is he's walking off the field and he's down, 10-3 at halftime. And it's just,
brutal.
The standard coach speak. And there it is.